Welcome to Crossroads. I'm Aaron Korth, and I am so pleased to be here with the inimitable Dean Pearson from Centurion Auto Logistics. I'm sure many of you out there know who Dean is, but for those who don't, Dean, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. I'm Dean Pearson. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Centurion Auto Logistics, and been in the auto transport industry for over 30 years and managing fleets up to 300 transports.
Very cool. Very cool. And so at Centurion Auto Logistics, if you don't mind, roughly what's the size of your fleet?
So our fleet is composed of about 225 trucks, and we range normally on any given day we're 40 to 50 independent contractors as part of that. Gotcha.
And this is a question that I think is going to come up a lot in this podcast. I think is important, for people to hear about this topic. And I think with any business, hiring staff and building up your workforce is very important, and especially with drivers. I mean, they're definitely a special breed. What is your talk a little bit about the process for you hiring your drivers, how you built up the fleet to the size it is?
Our drivers end up being the best recruiters for your business. Mm-hmm. They actually, so we've tried the cliche, give them referral cards for the drivers to hand out. But at the end of the day, what we found works best is incentivizing our drivers to bring in drivers that they would refer to our company. And what that's done is they always have a name. Most of the people we hire have a name of a driver that they brought in. Okay. And they become their mentors because they want to see them successful. And we've actually incentivized drivers to stay engaged with the person they brought in.
Got you. So they got a little bit of a stake in them being successful. That helps the whole mentorship element of it.
It works out well because they always have a friend to call.
Very cool.
Because it takes a little time before they trust people in the company.
Right.
But they always trust that guy because they're always saying, hey, you told me it was going to be this.
Right.
And it wasn't. And they say, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? So they'll stay engaged.
And they're another driver. They're in the same space that they are. Right. They're both drivers. So, yeah, there's definitely going to be more trust there at the beginning.
The conversation might have been 30 minutes at a truck stop.
Right.
That talked them into at least filling out the application. But getting to the point where they actually walk in the door and they're in training could be 3 months, 6 months, or a year later.
Right.
It's not always, and I think that's everybody's recruiting should be, not everybody's tomorrow, especially in our industry. You really want them to be committed to that lifestyle change if they're coming from something other than auto haul.
So if I said to someone that's just starting this business, I said, look, all you got to do to have successful drivers is do this mentorship program. That would all take, they'd be making as much money as Centurion?
Absolutely no. Of course not.
So there's more to it.
Of course not. There's more to it. And one of the things that I will tell you is that, and I think in the interview process, one of the biggest things that you have to determine in that process is do they care? Find something they care about and really dive into that. And that's really when I get the opportunity to be part of the questioning, is tell me something you cared about and continued to care about. Because you can find out a little more about it.
Have you ever got anything that you can share on camera? Have you ever got an interesting answer that's like...
Yes. Well, so I had to start modifying my question because most of them became their families.
Right.
So you really needed to pull it away. And I learned that every time that I early on asked that question is, well, my son when he was 12, So find out where they cared about another person.
Right.
And really dive and find out what they did and stayed involved, whether it was church related or their kids' friends.
Right.
Because as you know, all of us have kids' friends that don't always have the best circumstances.
Right, of course.
And so we find out where people really care when they get involved in those things.
Have you ever got an answer to that question where you're like, we're not hiring you?
Yes.
Yes. Can you give me examples?
Even so, you have drivers and you have office people, and I've had people cry when I've asked because you see something in them. And your job as an interviewer is, are you really you want people with emotions.
Right, of course.
That's where you find out.
Not a bad thing.
You find out if people care.
Right.
And I can tell you when I see people get emotional and for lack of a better term, you cracked the shell,
Right.
and you really got, because in an interview you got the resume,
Right.
and you got what they tell you,
believe me.
and they're
Yeah.
expecting the answers. I
Yeah.
mean, all of us
Yeah.
have been in an interview, and we know
Yeah.
what you're going to ask us.
Yes.
So mine is always watch and listen for some other people to ask something, and then you see something, you say, "Tell me a little more about."
Right.
And they say, "Well, this isn't related to what the job was."
Right.
No, but it's related to who you are.
Right.
And that's who you're hiring, because you're really just trying to find somebody that
Right.
really fits in your company. So the answers that when I see somebody, I've
Yeah.
had people
Answer the question.
so I'm doing a little politics, but I will tell you that one of the things that where you see somebody have to take a deep breath and regather themselves, and really, because they can go one way or the other. They can go and say, and go back to interview process,
Yeah.
or they can go, really, do they want the job, or they really want to be there?
Like, be real,
So
be transparent. Yeah.
When you find that they took that breath and go, you know what, I'm going to tell you the truth. They don't say it,
Yeah.
but you can tell it's that, all right, I'm either going to get the job or I'm not.
Right.
And they get to that point. I think that's a great point to get to with both office staff and your drivers.
Right.
Because someone will admit to, I wasn't a perfect driver, but these things came up in my life. And
sometimes those things rule you out,
that's
unfortunately.
right.
Right. Okay.
And so when you find, hey, can I work with this or can I not?
Right.
And that's,
So like, if I did kill 2 people driving,
Yeah.
but
if it was driving and it wasn't on your application, I can't help you, but there's some opportunities that maybe I can
Right.
steer you in the right direction.
they're a good person, but
let them down
yeah,
easy.
the metric, right.
Because you can't hire everybody and you
Right.
can't help everybody.
Of course.
But you also have to make sure you're hiring the best for your
Right.
company too.
Right.
I
At
mean,
the end of the day, being transparent during the interview process is really important, because it's going to come out eventually. If there's an issue there where you're incompatible with the company, it's going to come out later when
Yep.
there's already been time committed on both sides, and it's just
So I think, and that's a good thing. You don't want to disappoint the person in
Right.
there, but it also is, I think, as an interviewer, that you have to exploit that. You have to make them realize maybe they ran over their head, maybe
Yeah.
it wasn't the right
Oh,
place. Not in a way to embarrass them, but make them say, "Ooh, I know what you're talking about."
Personally, I think driving one of your trucks would be easy, even though I've only driven an SUV. So if I come up with that attitude, for instance, you'd be like, "Get out of here!" You don't know what you're
The
doing.
most fun I have is occasionally I get to do the road tests, because
Right.
we road test any applicant that we bring in.
Right.
So we have the non-experienced and the experienced.
Right.
And the non-experienced have never been in a car hauler.
Right.
So the first thing when they get in those trucks, it's just totally just, oh my gosh, what am I going to do here?
Right.
So I always take the time to show them what I think they need to know. What are you
Right.
scared about?
Like, where's the gaps?
Let's do a few laps before I take you out on the road.
Right.
Let's do a few laps around the parking lot. I want
Right.
you to be comfortable and give your best effort. This is non-judging. I want to make sure that you can do it
Right.
and that you're comfortable.
Right.
So we've spent 20 minutes driving around the parking lot
Right.
before.
Right.
And there's even been times when I've had to drive the truck back.
Right. Yeah.
Because it
it
didn't go so well.
Yeah.
But it also, at the end of that, you say, hey, I'm not telling you can't ever work here,
Yeah.
but you need to practice this.
Right.
And I think if you coach people on that, they already know they didn't get the job, but just going away, and I've had those people return.
Right.
So I think giving them a little bit, I don't know
Yeah.
if it's dignity, but a little face saving, that they say, you know what, I didn't do so well, but at least he told me where I needed some.
See, now you make me feel like a terrible person. I'm trying to get negative stuff, and you're, of course, Dean, being who Dean is like, there's a
I want to
positive
make sure
outcome
that I think that's the best part you have when you interact with people, is always seeing the positive. There's one simple thing about working with Dean, and as I refer to myself as no, I never refer to myself that, but is giving second chances. People never understand where they are the first time. So sometimes you have to just, if you're willing to give the second, doesn't mean you always do, but that you at least explore the opportunity of giving someone a second chance.
Yeah, like, certainly. I think, my business, there's definitely different elements of what makes someone successful and what they are. And if those elements could be overcome, definitely.
Right.
Sometimes
It can.
Right, sometimes it can.
Sometimes
Being
it's
fair,
hey,
sometimes
let me help you get a job here
in a different
data
industry.
entry.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting stuff. I mean, that's definitely a key part of business, right? Is I think I like the saying 95% success of any business is the staff, it's the people that you
Right.
hire. You know, that's a very important part. But this is logistics. You know, there's more to it than so. There's a lot going on.
There is.
As everybody listening to this, and as you know, and as I know. So discuss some of the secret sauce stuff that you can. Obviously,
Yeah.
you don't want to give away the entire operation here. Some of the secret sauce, like I know some of it. I definitely love to discuss Dean score, like as it's
yeah.
affectionately known. But you have the mic. You tell us a little bit about.
So that I think the easiest thing, everybody talks about secret sauce, and there's thousands of books about business.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason there's thousands of books are everybody's book has something that somebody wants.
Right.
It's the same concepts of successful business, and all of them come down to people and how you treat people
Right.
and how you get them to do because as a business leader, you're directing them to do things.
Right.
I mean, you're
have to buy into that.
you're the guy behind the strings.
Yeah. Right.
And you want them to feel like you're not moving the strings.
Right. That
Right?
they would move that way anyways.
Yeah.
That there's some reason for all this.
So the secret sauce, I believe that you should be able to share, other than, some of the things where you think you created a little advantage for yourself. But those really aren't secret sauce. Those are innovations.
Yeah.
So the secret sauce is everybody should have them. In our business, I've always told people the things that we're graded on are whether we deliver the cars on time and if we don't damage them. And
Like
that's
those
that's
two
auto
simple
all.
things, right? Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And so the secret sauce of that is, how do you get
It's not what color you paint the trucks.
No,
I thought for sure.
no. You know that the colors matter just for recognition, but
Right.
at the end of the day, so now everybody's secret sauce becomes, how do I get the group of guys that I brought to this thing, or I was lucky enough to have, or I ended up with.
Right.
Either way, sometimes they just never leave.
Right.
But you still need the best of them, and you still need them to care about those two things.
Right.
And how do you get a group of guys to do that?
Right.
And gals? There, there's not as many women in the business, but I will tell you that the ones that we do, this is maybe a little different, but every time we get females that enter our business, they teach the men some things they didn't know, because I believe that women have 1 degree above men.
Oh, we
carry.
as I can tell you from ClearPath, in terms of our first thing, there's a lot of women-owned auto transport companies, probably more than people suspect. And in terms of like high-level like staff, like executives, managers, and stuff like that, there's a lot of women in the industry, and there's a lot of family-owned companies where the wife plays a very prominent role in the business's strategy and running it, like from the back office. Usually, I'm not trying to say always, but usually the husband was the driver.
Yep.
And the wife was the businesswoman.
Kept
like
it
that.
together.
Yeah,
That's
there's
right.
a lot of individual cases I can think of like that. Yeah.
So I think we can all learn from, whether it's your mother or your spouse, or that there's traits that women have. And I think as men, the more we learn those traits, and we try and bring those in, and when we can't bring them, that we defer,
Right. Yeah.
to make sure those traits are there.
I'm
And it's
thinking
like,
everything you're saying, let's not get in trouble.
yeah, the piece is, it's not about
It's all
that,
good. It's
that
all,
they shouldn't be all
right.
of it, but if we bring those things to the forefront and make sure we're caring about people,
Yeah.
and here's one of the secret sauces, that drivers are different, every one of them, and I always say they have about 16 personalities. It depends on the day of the week and the load they are going to be presented.
Right.
If it's not exactly what fit into their schedule,
They'll speak their mind too. Drivers are very
and so
forthright.
that can go from 0 to 100, good or bad,
Right.
depending on. And the load on Monday would have been great,
Right.
but on a Friday, it's the worst thing that could have happened to them.
That right there, and we'll talk about this later, is the challenge of creating an AI system to consolidate and assign loads.
Yes.
You just said it right there.
Yes,
Like I don't mean to interrupt what you're saying, but
the perfect load doesn't match what he wanted to do.
How do you computerize that? It's very difficult when it comes down to a driver's sensibilities, which is key to being a successful business. The drivers have to be happy with the loads they're delivering, and it could be the most like personal reasons they want this load going to that location that still jives with the business and it isn't going to change your margins that much, and you want to satisfy what they need. And how do you really put that? How does the computer understand that? The human element.
The human element didn't know that you had a piano recital on Thursday night, that you forgot to tell the office staff that you needed to be home, and you were planning it on your own, and everything was working perfect till you came up. And on Thursday, I needed you to go 500 miles instead of the 200 miles that would have got you home on time.
You know that's a real story.
And now you're like, oh my gosh, now there's going to be a fight somewhere. Am I going to fight with the office or am I fighting with my wife?
Definitely office.
But that's most often that's the one that comes out. Now you have the office staff is like, what the heck went wrong? So there is the AI challenge, but also the challenge of understanding drivers inside your business,
which I don't know
is you have to have people that are, well, how can we work through this?
You have to have people that have good relationships with the drivers, and the drivers have good relationships with those people in the business. So that's part of like the success of the business, that human element. Let's talk about AI a little bit. I have a lot of specific opinions.
What's that stand for?
Artificial intelligence. I have a lot of different opinions about it, and not getting into any of those, but sometimes I think sometimes automation gets mistaken for artificial intelligence, where you basically have a set of rules and routines that will work to automate data in a certain way rather than having to key it in or do it. So there's cases where, and there's people that are working on load consolidation, automatic dispatching. That's I think two of the low-hanging fruit areas of this industry. Press a button, you have 1,000 cars that need to be delivered in inventory, or 100 or 20, whatever it is. Press a button, boom, 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 consolidates all the loads, assigns
tells
to the
you who
drivers.
the best drivers are.
Exactly, And I think we can always get 80 to 90% there, but if you don't get 100% there with building it, it's going to be messed up. You're going to have like bad loads, you might have illegal loads, you might have like all sorts of problems. So there's a lot of people doing some innovative stuff, but I don't have them in my chair right now. Right. I have Dean Pearson in my chair right now, and you've done some like pretty cool stuff. And some of it is so good that he might not want to. I'm sorry, people. He might not want to share all this on camera, but if we can get him to share a little bit, I think you want to listen up to what he has to say.
So I believe that as you've referred to as the Dean score. The Dean score. What we did is just look at really successful loads and what the truck capacities were, because the trucks have changed, the vehicles have changed, the size of the vehicles have changed. Mm-hmm. All those things change, and drivers are expected to just make it work. And so all we've done is look at it and say, can we make this number make sense? Right. That as a driver gets better, because when they come in, they're rookies, and you need to protect them. You want to make sure that the load, that they're successful at loading it, and as they build their confidence, because it really takes a time period. Some of them come in natural, no different than any sport or anything. Mm-hmm. They're naturals, and they can advance through that Dean score much faster with success, because you're really trying to make sure, one, on time and without damage.
Right.
So the biggest with the load size is damage. So we've actually scored the cars so that the equivalency, we just call it load equivalency.
That's a fancy word.
That's fancy right there.
It's like inimitable.
That's right.
Which, by the way, means awesome and unique, basically, for anybody that wasn't sure.
So really what that does is no matter what brand of vehicle, it takes a vehicle, whether it's the shape of a SUV or a truck or a large SUV or a sports car, and gives it a score along with the two-dimensional size, and relates it to the most common car of a mid-size sedan. So we're filling a truck with the most vehicles, no matter what they are in size. So it could be 6 large pickups or 9 small little cars, of whether it's sports cars or the Siennas, whatever those are. And doing that, you can find out how the driver's progressing, but you can also monitor how your experienced guys, whether they become profitable or not, where they're taking that small load, and you could have added bigger cars to it. Because it's about, at the end of the day in our business, it's about filling the truck with the best possible load. Not so much number of units, but really the size that it's filling that box of 9 units or 10 units, whichever trucks.
I mean, from the software side of things, I could say like load efficiency is a word that gets bandied about a lot, and it can have a couple different meanings. One of it is obviously you want to get as much, and I know it doesn't mean number necessarily, like you said, but you want to fill the truck as close to capacity as you can, and you want to have that. You don't want to be driving the trucks empty, as little as possible.
That's right.
Like, so those are the two elements of load efficiency, and that goes into, obviously some of this like automation and calculation, but a lot of that's just in the head of a dispatcher. They understand like this kind of. They understand that 8 cars going to from South Florida, dropping off 4 in Orlando and dropping off 4 in Jacksonville is not as good as having 8 cars going straight to Jacksonville.
That's right.
You're going to get those Jacksonville rates on all the cars rather than 4 Orlando rates and 4 Jacksonville.
It's all about
rates.
distance, right?
Yeah. So, but you definitely, I think, with that Dean score, really taken to the next level, because you relate it back to the drivers. It's not just get that score as high as possible or always try to hit this number with that score. It's about, based on that score, you drivers advance to being able to do tighter and tighter, more and more advanced scores.
That's right. Yeah. So. At some point, no different than hiring a new employee, you train them.
Yeah.
And in our business, they're not going to be perfect even coming out of a training. So you allow them to develop those skills, and you watch the success of the size of those loads. And again, load equipment, not that they hauled 9 units every time, because it could have been 9 of the smallest cars, and say, hey, this guy's averaging 9 units on a 9-unit truck.
Right.
Or he can average 9 load equivalency, which could have been 6 units.
Right.
But boy, can he load, because he's loading a bunch of trucks and SUVs.
Right.
And doing very well.
And he should get the same amount of credit for the person that loaded 9 smaller cars. 6, you understand that. And you basically made a metric out of it.
So being able to evaluate what that load equivalency versus just units hauled gives you a way to advance them and really know that they're getting the concept of loading the best efficient loads for us to make money. Right. I mean, that's really what you're looking at.
It's straightforward when you say it, but you did. It's a lot of work.
To
get that data right and all that. It's not just you can come up with the idea and do it.
It didn't just happen, but what it does is it makes it so you can compare things. And ours was really, and this will be appreciated, that some companies still have 75-foot trucks,
right, and
still have high rail trucks, and still have easy load trucks, and still have combinations of trucks. And the only way to look at that and see if a driver is advancing is what's the best load equivalency on a 75-foot truck.
It matters.
And you can now look at the equipment and say, okay, if we're only getting 8 units on a high rail truck, and now we're getting 9.6 on a 9-unit easy load 80-foot truck, where's that opportunity to have more? Does the truck pay for itself by buying the better equipment?
Yeah, this is like you take it down to a granular level. So as the business expands, the industry changes, the market changes. Like they're allowing 80-foot trucks, you can plug right into that.
But they're going to get better trucks. I mean, as they say, everybody's trying to build a better piece of equipment, a better mousetrap for us. But I will tell you that most of the equipment we're using now is much better than what I learned on, and much better than the guy that, from not just a safety standpoint, but from the speed that they can load, the safety, the clearances between the cars for damages. All those things are certainly beneficial to the industry.
All right, very cool. Appreciate that. That's it's always fascinating when we talk about it. So I'm glad to get you to talk to somebody else about it.
I certainly over the years have talked to many about those particular. You got to find some way to measure drivers.
Right. You got to be able to quantify, basically.
So if you can't find whatever you're measuring, I mean, if you have short loads, long loads, being able to say, is this driver a good driver, if he drives a lot of miles,
Right.
or is he an equivalent driver if he does a lot of short loads and hauls a lot of units?
Right.
So how do you blend those and find a number? So we also have that as well, where we measure those systems.
Thank you. Perfect. It's actually, I've been, we talked about it a long time, and I've always been very impressed with it. And it sounds like, I don't think something someone can necessarily duplicate just hearing that, but I think it inspires people as a software guy, I can say when you can quantify things,
right?
You can break them down into numbers. It's much easier to grow. Like, you're not going to have to just, I'll figure it out when I get there sort of thing. You can kind of just.
So I always, when the first time that, especially from a IT perspective, when they see a formula and they just say, okay, we can do that, but they don't have any idea what it's doing.
Right.
And then when they see it and it comes out and it looks the same on the end result, they go, huh, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. When you see it in action.
I always see when they put a name to it, which it shouldn't have ever been my score, but it really was the driver's score, so that people can manage without having to go into depth. They can really, in a moment's notice, look at the guy if he's hauled 100 loads and make it make sense. It didn't matter what the makeup of the cars were. They knew if he hauled a nine unit equivalent load, that it was a good load. Yep. Whatever made that up.
Very cool, and very cool. Love that stuff. So we're going to take a quick break here to show a short commercial from our sponsor, ClearPath TMS. Thank you so far for listening. We'll be back on the other side. All right, we need to brainstorm for this commercial. How do we show our audience that we're the best auto transport platform in the industry?
Oh, we need to show them our dispatch manager. Optimizing routes has never been easier.
We should definitely show them our EDI management screen. Managing contracts is simple with ClearPath's EDI toolkit. Who doesn't want to work with the big manufacturers?
These are all great ideas, but we need to highlight what makes us special.
Sure, we can talk about all our awesome features, but the bottom line is we invest in every single one of our clients, giving them the power to scale up and increase their revenue.
That's perfect. Welcome back to Crossroads. I'm here with Dean Pearson, and we were talking before the break about the success of business and everything. And I know you guys are celebrating your 50th year anniversary.
Yes, we just we're now starting our 51st, but we spent the whole last year, 50 years in business, and all of those with Southeast Toyota. We started with Southeast Toyota in 1973.
Yeah, I know Southeast Toyota is a big customer of you guys.
Actually, they were the start of the Centurion. That was our start in auto transportation.
Yeah, so Toyota's very interesting, because I know a thing or two about Toyota too, but I think you would be better to explain sort of like the origin of how like Toyota auto, like the whole Toyota business in America is actually a lot of people don't really know how that all started and works. Can you talk
so
a little
I don't
bit
know
about
that I'm the exact, but I certainly have a little bit of experience in it. But certainly one of the reasons and how Toyota came to the U.S. was to give out distributorships across the United States. And so with those distributorships, we're in different regions and each had a territory. And over the years, they've ended up acquiring back some of those distributorships in the Northeast and Northwest and Southern California, but two of them remain private distributorships, and that would be Gulf States Toyota and Southeast Toyota.
Right,
so
this is why we don't see commercials for Northeast Toyota.
it might be, but from a standpoint of from our business, obviously those particular have their regions, and that's really been what Centurion's success was with Southeast Toyota.
Right. Yeah, I know. Obviously, different OEMs, car manufacturers have, some big carrier contracts in place, and it's from where I'm standing, without getting into details of it, because we support many different carriers across the industry, and we got something like you talk about all the different data connections to these different manufacturers. It's literally hundreds, literally data back and forth, whether there's orders, pickup statuses, payments, like that sort of thing. And there's a different, there's very different vibes across the OEMs. Some OEMs have long-standing contracts with certain carriers.
Right.
Some just
Short term.
Anyone bid.
Everybody's a carrier.
Yeah, everyone's a
Everybody's
yeah. You get a contract. You get a contract. Yeah. And then and some of them are in the middle. And I think you're definitely. I think with you guys and other Toyota. The Gulf State Toyota. Without getting into specifics, it's definitely longer standing relationships with transport company. And personally, I think that's a good thing. I mean, you really develop
I think
efficiencies and all that sort of thing.
I think there's good and bad to both, but I also know that one of the greatest things about this, every other carrier that may be listening knows what every other carrier has for a contract.
Yeah.
So there's no mystery in, everybody knows that, our main business is Toyota, and this is one that some know, some, it's amazing. One of the things, if you go back and look, and there's some, believe it or not, there's some books that have auto haul history.
Yeah.
And Centurion's trucks used to say Toyota on them. They didn't even say Centurion in the early days. But with that was Southeast Toyota. And over the years, we were able to work directly with Toyota. We like to refer to them as Big Toyota and Little Toyota. But at the end of the day, they're very important. And we do work with other OEMs and have over the course of the year, more or less every manufacturer we've hauled cars for.
Oh, I know. We had to deal with the back end of some of that.
So as you find that it fits within your business, and over the years things change in your business, change with your drivers. Cell phones with drivers have been one of the biggest changing in drivers. This is
it went from it used to be company owned lockdown tablets to everybody's got a phone.
Even that, but more with the driver themselves and being connected with home.
Yeah.
Before it was call in at 9:00 at night, find out how the day went.
Yeah.
Now it's every minute finding out that the water heater broke and I got to go home. So the old days when you're driving by, I'm familiar with this. You had a pager, and you check in. The next cell
baby
phone
about to be born.
The next payphone you could find at the truck stop that had the phone cards that you put in, and it's sitting at there while you're eating your dinner.
Yeah.
And you found out about the day. Yeah. So really connected. Learning to deal with drivers and those have changed lanes that work for your business. Whether drivers want to be home, the long haul drivers. And I think that's something that's changed for all the OEMs, is those routes that used to be really good for companies changed over the years, and different companies have taken that because their drivers don't mind doing that long haul, and our company has changed to
sometimes, I think this is a good segue to talk about brokering, because in some cases I think an OEM knows that their contract carrier will be using a lot of third-party carriers, and as long as they're managing things correctly and meeting the customer service metrics, they're in theory okay with that. And there are cases, obviously, where a sub-hauler comes in and goes after a contract and
does a bad job.
A does a bad job, but even the idea of going after so. From what I've seen, there's cases where they're going after the contract, and if they're doing it not in a non-transparent way, that can be like a reputation issue. If they're doing it in a transparent way, and I think people would be surprised, there's times where bigger carriers will uplift a smaller carrier.
One of the things that I think is important about business is that some OEMs are looking for a solution, and I don't know that they're necessarily looking for a new carrier. But one of the I think the driving factors of getting business is doing a good job. So how smart, but I really caution everyone that is in our business is we're not going to get new business by someone doing a bad job. We're going to get more business by focusing on Centurion and doing a better job.
Right. Yeah.
And people were fortunate to have contracts that recognize us, but even going outside of those and bidding on new business or being part of business, or even partnering with another carrier. I think that's
that's kind of what I'm talking
that's
about.
That's one of the most important on the broker side in business is the relationships you have with the people you use to subcontract with, is making sure that that understanding between them is, look, if I'm taking your business and subcontracting for you, I'm going to do a good job. Eventually, that particular person that I'm hauling for will probably call, because there's not very many of us.
Yeah.
So they'll see enough of your trucks and they'll say, hey, would you be interested in doing business? Now, whether that's a good OEM or a bad, that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But one of the things as a business that always needs to be said is, hey, I know who has that business. Let me call them and see if I can help them. That's the way we prefer to do that. And over the years, it seems to work. But the carrier, the OEM, is going to keep calling you. You're
not out of the equation. You're still there.
Once you're in there and they see your trucks, once they see your trucks enough, so you have to have an honest conversation with that carrier that gave you the business, whether it's contractual, whether it's not. Something's happening that the OEM is looking, and so you can either have that as a good conversation and say, hey, how can we help you? Or, hey, listen, they continue to call me. What's going on?
Right.
And sometimes they'll say, no, it's good. Or, hey, go ahead and take that bit. Go ahead and take their what do they call it, spot buy or contract, whatever. But there's so many things that happen, and sometimes it's above board, sometimes it's not. But if you're doing a good job, a lot of that will take care of itself.
Exactly. I like that.
They're not going to be looking.
It's self-correcting.
If you're doing a good job, and in every situation, there's times where you're not doing a good job.
Yeah.
But it's how you handle that.
Yeah.
And one is, and whether this is secret sauce or advice to other, is be transparent, be ahead of the game with your customer and say, hey, I'm going to fall behind, or I'm not going to be able to do that, or
I have a capacity issue.
I can't find the sub-haulers. I can't,
some route going on.
Something going on. So,
and they should understand. Hey, there's a hurricane down here. Everyone's hauling stuff
whatever
out,
it is,
rerouting stuff.
Whatever it is. Hey, this carrier just got a windfall, and they're paying 20 times what I can even.
Yeah.
I can't pull them in that I used to have them. So whatever that is, whatever the situation can be the worst, or it can be something simple. But if you're out ahead of it, and not letting them find, hey, what happened? You're now 3 days behind.
Yeah.
Now they got to make an emergency situation. The chances of you recovering on the next bid or the next whatever it is become less and less because of how you handled it. So I can tell you that I like to be out ahead because if you're truly watching your business, you know when that's coming. I mean, and no different than you on your side, when you're behind and things are starting.
If there's a problem with the EDI connection, I know we're going to get a call.
You know it's coming. It might be everybody at the same time.
Yeah.
But the more you have out ahead of that, the better you are.
I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. I promise not to. But you have said in the past, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I think it's clear that any big carrier has, I want to say the word created, I'll use the phrase created businesses, created other subhaulers, like gave them their start where they were basically the subhaulers dependent on your freight. And then over time, they grow and they don't need your freight anymore. They become like more independent. How do you feel about that? Like you when I've heard you say it, you almost say it with pride, but isn't there a side to it where it's like, well, it wasn't like you came to mentor. It's not like you're investing in their business. It's not like you get anything out of it eventually. Besides, I think, good reputation and the respect that you deserve and that you have. How do you feel about that?
So originally, when I first watched and saw some of those relationships turn into others getting business, it made you feel like, not so good.
Yeah.
and I would say that it wasn't, but one of the things you have to separate is is what did you do wrong, and what could you have done better that one you could have grown versus them growing in that
that's
spot.
my answer, right? Like
And so so you can't look at it as there was an opportunity that they're sitting back, you're busy doing the thing, counting on them, but you're thinking, I guess we would call it contingency planning.
Yeah.
I mean, what if?
Yeah.
So
Right.
if you're
You can
not
always
thinking about, hey, if I'm always using them as part of my business, isn't it fair if they're part of your business to ask them, what are your plans?
Right. Right. Exactly.
I think the best thing is that if it's almost like getting in a room and brainstorming on how are you going to get better.
Yeah.
I think that's that moment. And if
Yeah.
you don't realize it
Yeah.
as a leader or of a business, that you don't realize he just gave you things you need to do better.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Because you're not going to take him out, but your job now should be, how do I convince
why,
him?
yeah.
How do I convince him that that's not the best place?
Yeah.
So almost in your statement is trying to, you may never, because sometimes that entrepreneurial spirit is just there.
That's their goal, is to grow their business. Because I think very few people would say, I don't want 500 trucks. You know, and there are people that just don't want to deal with that.
Right.
I'm happy with my few.
They can,
God
they
bless
can
them.
find their 30 and say,
yeah. What's a good mix of there's obviously guys out there that don't have trucks or don't have very few trucks. They just want a broker. And there's this whole sort of sub industry of broker technology and all
Right.
that. I won't get into that. But there's but then there's definitely companies out there that have their trucks, have their business, keep their drivers busy, and they're not so focused on brokering. What do you feel is like a good mix, like a healthy mix of brokers versus hauling your own stuff, like stuff you're giving out, stuff you're giving to your drivers, and stuff that you sub-haul?
For us, it's always been less of brokering or outsourcing any of our freight and taking care of the customer with
And the drivers,
our company
but, like,
assets, so that those conversations are about the driver,
Right.
and making sure they have a good stable paycheck
Right.
weekly and monthly, and they can balance those highs and lows, and then have a good group of outside carriers, whether in your business, if it's 5% or 10% or 100%, which
Right.
is not our model. Ours is a very small,
Right.
but also taking care of that group and maintaining that they're always there for us, even to the point of we make sure when it's slow that we make sure they stay
Feed
around
them as well. You feed
Oh,
them as
absolutely.
well.
You can't expect them to come work for you
Right.
when they didn't have anything or they won't have a truck.
Right.
So we always make sure that core group, we're treating them very similar to our other assets, and giving them when it's slow, making sure they have some to feed on as well. So I think that's been our success, is having a group that we can, even in the slow times, keep them at least steady, and then having them really ramp up and take care of that. Because you can't expect everybody to work at full bore all the time.
Right,
You know, especially in our business, as the first part of the month, it's going to be a little slow, 3 loads. And then at the month, you want them to do 6.
Right.
So you got to find out how you get them to do 5 all the way through.
Right. I get
And
you.
whatever that number is. And that's where more of that secret is, being able to evaluate what that looks like. You know, how many hours do you really expect
Right.
out of a driver
Right.
year round?
Right.
And that's some of our performance metrics of really looking at what does that number look like and how do they achieve it on an annualized basis, not just a weekly and a monthly. Because at the end of the day, you want them to have a certain number for the year.
Right.
And that's really, you monitor it on a weekly and on a monthly. But quarterly gives you a good idea. And then certainly annualized, what you're trying to get out of that driver and that asset of truck, how many miles or how many units you
So you
want
can't
delivered.
just give out loads willy-nilly and have it all work out?
No, you really,
No?
logistics,
Yeah.
you gotta, you gotta try and make it where everybody can make a paycheck.
Right.
For sure.
So true. Okay, so the final bit, we need to we're going to have ChatGPT ask you a question. All
Oh
right?
my goodness.
I already
bringing me
yeah,
into
here
the.
it is. I already asked the question. I already got ChatGPT's answer because
theirs
nobody wants to see me type on air. But I wrote to ChatGPT, I have Dean Pearson, who is the chief operating officer for a large auto transport company. Please think of a specific question for Dean that would encourage him to share some of his insight. Now, ChatGPT, ask a good question. It's going to allow you to recap some of the things you said.
I may
right? Okay.
maybe I should ask him first so I know the answer.
A specific question you could ask Dean Pearson might be, Dean, and it gives quotes and everything.
That's
Dean, as the COO of a major auto transport company, how do you balance the challenges of scaling operations with maintaining the quality of service, especially in an industry that's constantly evolving with new technologies and regulations? It's a pretty good question.
That's a pretty good question.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. I could have. Wow. So obviously we've covered some of those points.
We have.
But I would say in a nutshell, I really think that I heard many, obviously you pick up from people you've worked with, you've talked to, you've heard speak. And one of my former employers made a statement about, and it was in the auto industry, but not in auto haul. And it was about culture. And it was about the size of your company is you only need to become as big as the size to maintain the culture that you wanted. So once that size and you can't keep your culture that you decided that it was what you wanted,
right,
and it starts to get away from you or it changes to where you didn't want it, then you didn't size the company the way you wanted. So it was really, that was one of the things where if you decide that you want to have a personal touch with your drivers,
right.
And at Centurion, that's important to us. And we do that with our safety meetings and having drivers once a month in person. So we have the same meeting. It's way too many times, but more than 10 times we offer the same meeting.
Right.
And I can remember hiring someone that had to do those meetings. And they said, I have to do what?
10 per month.
10 per month.
Wow.
The same meeting.
Same meeting.
And so now you have
different drivers
different
go
audience.
Every time, but the idea is that you allow.
Yeah.
Do you go to different? Is it all?
They're not. No, they're all in different locations.
Wow. So they're traveling to these.
3 of these offerings in Georgia, and most of them are in our corporate in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
However, the drivers, we bring them. We like to say we bring the meeting to the drivers on their schedule.
Right.
Because once it screws up networks when you pull everybody in.
Right, of course.
So doing that, but watching that meeting and seeing that I've many times attended every one of them.
Right.
I don't do it every time.
No.
But our safety director does.
Right.
And having the energy level and being able to get the message across and have the interaction with the drivers, I think that's the most important piece for us. Mm-hmm. And I think it's an important piece of our culture. When we started that, we were never going to get drivers to say, I can't wait to go to a safety meeting.
Right.
You're never,
right, exactly.
It's never going to happen. But what we did get is when they go to dispatch, I need to attend a safety meeting.
Right.
I felt like we won.
Right.
And then to see drivers stay after the close.
Right.
That's when you know you won. When they stayed, the meeting's over, but they stay and they talk to each
Right.
other. And in a trucking business where everybody's going different directions,
Right.
to see that I knew that we had something that was special.
So scaling to you is like about building culture.
It was about culture,
It becomes
for
like
sure.
a self-fulfilling prophecy. To some
And if someone says, hey, we need you to add 50 drivers or 50 trucks, or the business takes 50 trucks so now you have to look at it and say, how are we going to maintain that, or can we?
15 safety meetings per month.
Well, can you scale that?
Yeah.
Is what you're doing important to you? Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, in our business, it is important because drivers they drive trucks because they don't like dealing with people in the office very often. And that's where we manage, although we have all this technology we know where they're at. We know what they're doing every minute of the day.
Yeah.
But that's not what they want.
Right.
So that's the challenge of only using that information when you need to.
Right.
And it's usually when it's not meeting the customer's expectations.
Right.
A great rule that I think I always tell, wouldn't it be great to run any business and have no rules?
Interesting philosophical question.
Why are there rules? And that's why I always ask them.
Well, yeah, rules because of something went
because
wrong.
you've
Yeah.
failed
Yeah.
to meet the customer's expectations.
Right. Yeah. If everybody operated 100% and always had the right attitude and the competency and the passion and cared,
Right.
do the right thing, you wouldn't have to give them any rules. Right.
So wouldn't it be great? And I think this is where you look at it, is if you'll reevaluate your rules, and are they still relevant, and get rid of them.
Oh, gotcha.
If you can.
Yeah.
Each time and I'm not speaking for everybody, I'm speaking for us, that looking at your driver handbook or your office handbook, whatever it is, employee handbook, and really reviewing it and say, do you really need to add more? Or should you simplify this and say, is it as simple as doing the right thing when nobody's watching?
Right.
That's my personal reason.
Right.
Definition of integrity.
Put that in there. I want to put that in our handbook. Do you do the right thing when nobody's watching? It's a great philosophy. Yeah.
And so if you can simplify and say, do I have something? And I really believe that's the key to being successful now, is allowing people to have input into that. And the more of your office and your drivers, because they're never going to trust everybody, but you need to find somebody in your business that they trust and are willing to do a good job for.
Yeah.
You want them to always do a good job just for themselves, but they always have someone that they count on in your business. And it's not going to be the same person.
Yeah.
But get enough
back
of
to
those
the mentorship
people.
you're talking about.
Get enough of those that if you have 200 people and each driver, there's 5 drivers that trust one person.
Right.
So now you know how many people you have to have. That might not
Right.
might not be able to afford that.
Yeah.
But there's where you decide that's a lot of
40,
people.
I
That's a
think it
lot of
is.
support staff.
Yeah.
But it could be as simple as one of the technicians.
Right.
You got 5 drivers that love this technician, or one loading yard supervisor, or one operations person. So at the end of the day, that you got everybody trust somebody.
I think you're so right, because it's funny that even ChatGPT asked that question, because it's almost like a cutesy question, like, how do you deal with scalability with the changing technology and this and that? But really, the success of a business, somebody that's been successful in business as you have, and I think I can speak a little bit to this as well, is that managing the people, like having like that culture. And one thing like I've learned as I've grown in size is those team events, and I used to scoff at them, like nobody wants to get together, go bowling or do potlucks or like have like some like weekly boba meeting, boba tea meeting, or these sort of things. But I've learned that they really look forward to these like little cultural elements to it, and that's sort of like the most obvious example of it. I think there's other cultural elements where just even like having like an espresso machine, and then you have some people that know how to do the espresso, so they do. We have at ClearPath, we have a big group that go on a daily walk. This is in Florida summer heat.
Yeah.
They go on a daily walk for 10 minutes. So they never miss it. And I even like joke, I'm like, enjoy the sauna, whatever. But they go and they just get out of the office and they walk and they talk and everything like that. And it's very important to them. And that, so yeah, I could buy this great software package or write AI for the business or do all these like technological things or like, smart financial accounting or whatever you have, all those elements that you learn in business school, right? But the fact that my staff, a big group of them, get together for a walk, I feel like I'm successful in business. I feel like that's a successful element of business.
They want to share
have
ideas.
That community.
Yep.
And so fostering that community is the thing that people like don't like, real business people don't like, oh, like I didn't get my MBA for that. But you know what? That is huge. And so I think it's great that that's your basic answer. It's like you got to focus on that stuff to be able to grow really large. Yeah.
That really, and some of those just take off for themselves. They really, I don't think they ask you.
I didn't plan the walk thing.
I think they started doing it. And then he said, there's value
more
in that.
June, more and more
and you
join.
need to you would need to encourage it in a roundabout way. Why don't we take more walk? No, you don't want to do that, but you want to allow them to come up with ideas where that, because they got to get away from it. But I think of what is that one movie? A Few Good. Where's my bat?
Yeah.
Think better when I get my bat. Right?
Yeah. The Few Good Men?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
There's some
great lines from when he's like doing his clothes.
He's trying to figure out how we're going to challenge it. Where's my bat? Is those moments, you don't know what they are. You want to find out what those moments are in your own business. And that's really, as a leader, willing to go see them and see them see how they get along with and who they get along with.
Yeah.
More than, because if you have a problem with people getting along,
you're gonna have a problem.
You got a bigger problem than with culture. But the more is getting them to get along to develop business and be a better business. That's what more I'm saying than that.
Couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with that. Well, on that note, I think we're going to wrap up this session. I can't thank you enough for taking it was a long drive down to get here. You know how much Shlomo and I consider you a friend, and it's a real pleasure when we can do business with someone that we feel such a personal connection to, and we have so much respect for your knowledge. And I think you're doing a real service to Crossroads and to everybody listening. And thank you very much for coming on, Dean.
Well, I appreciate you having me. And as I said, I wanted to be part. I committed to being part, but I would love to come back and actually, share more. And so it was obviously a great first event.
Yes,
for
we'll
me.
do better. We'll do better every time.
No, not just better, but I think there's people out there want to know things, and you don't know what people want to know till you get a little bit of feedback.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll get that feedback. And again, thank you for coming, and thank you everyone for listening. And with that, we're going to sign off. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.